We would now like to welcome our first panel session of the day, which looks at technology integration in higher education. I'm pleased to introduce moderator and chair, Faisal Ali Al-Balushi, chairman of the Omani Society for Education Technology, Dr. Hussein Al-Mahdi, Dean of Academic Support Services at the University of Sharjah, Ian McNaught, Director of Teaching and Learning at the National University of Sciences and Technology in Oman, Hamad Abdel Al, Director of Digital Experience and Innovation at King Abdullah University of Science and Technology in Saudi Arabia, and Dr. Rana Tamim, Dean at the College of Education and Professor of Educational Technology at Zayed University. Thank you all for joining us, and I'll now hand over to you, Faisal.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you and all guest speakers for attending today. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. As you know, we all know, year 2020 was a very crucial year for higher education institutions. Universities that invested in technology and scientific research were the leading force of change during the pandemic, not only in one field like health, but also in education as well. While some, universities struggled to operate, to open their doors, to sustain the teaching and learning, others were able to support the nation to combat COVID-19 due to their previous investment in scientific research, as I said, and also the investment in technology. Today, we are inviting leading thought leaders from different GCC universities to talk about technology integration in higher education, how EdTech is positioned now compared to before 2020, and finally, how technology integration will affect the education system in the higher education in the future. So I would like to start with my first guest speaker, Dr. Hussein Al-Mahdi. Dr. Hussein, because of coronavirus outbreaks, universities out of necessity had to close campuses and provide teaching and learning via online learning platforms or learning management systems. Despite universities' effort to make sure that students get the best learning experiences in a remote learning system, for students, such environment could not replace the on-campus experiences. For students, the learning does not just happen in classroom or lecture hall. They also utilize many other services provided at universities, such as academic counseling, library services, labs, independent learning center services, and others. So from your point of view, how technology integration in higher education is vital for establishing effective student support infrastructure? How could innovative technologies enable universities to provide the on-campus student services in an online learning environment? And you can talk about also your experience doing so at Sharjah University. To you, Doctor.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, thank you for having me, and I'm very pleased to be in this webinar with my esteemed colleagues to talk about this very, very important topic, especially after the period where we had good experience. Institutions have very good experience with remote learning. In fact, I think this is an excellent question. Asking for something which is an issue that, in my mind, I think it has been overlooked in the past year or so during COVID. And it has been overlooked in two ways, in the formulating our education continuity plans. That's something that one component was missing. We were focusing more on teaching and learning and instructional delivery, and we sort of forgot about the other aspects. And also when we assessed our learning, at least our experience in the remote learning. So, and I think this is an extremely important question, because it's speaking to myself and colleagues that the college experience or the journey, the post-secondary education journey, is not really about learning only. It's not being coming to get education and learn sciences, maths, and so forth and go. The learning experience really goes beyond that, especially in terms of interaction, developing friends, benefit from the facilities as you have highlighted, different facilities, be it the available on campus, be it sports facilities, councils, student societies, social and cultural activities, all these wonderful peer services, and also the that sort of face-to-face experience that students miss during the COVID, face-to-face experience with their instructors and so forth. And also taking part in these activities, because these activities in the past, prior to COVID, were basically a mean by which students, vent, students relax, students take time off classes. And in fact, I think it's very, all of us know that research have shown that these extracurricular activities, or sort of these activities in general, they also have an impact on student performance. Now, I think to answer the question more specifically, I would like to share some of the experiences or some of the things that we've done in the University of Sharjah, because we did look into this. We did, sort of notice that this was indeed a concern for us, that we really need to look beyond the instructional delivery. We need to look at how do we utilize, our technological tools to make sure that students get that experience, or at least a good portion of it. So what the University of Sharjah has done, we've taken quite a number of steps. For example, when we set up our LMS, the learning management system, we made sure that we did not focus only on the course delivery, but we went beyond that to make sure that students have, for example, open sessions through MS Teams or through Zoom, tutorial sessions, counseling sessions, academic advising sessions, and so forth. So that was something that we utilized technology to make sure that students have that, sort of mean. And then the next thing, we ensured that all the services, all the support services is connected or somehow integrated with the student information system, the SIS system. Another initiative is that we ensure that all our support services, be it the library, be it the research labs, be it let's say some of the research groups or the research funding, is made available through what we refer to as self-service virtual portals. So we made sure that some we built on in-house, and some we sort of looked into different solutions available in the market, where we made sure that all of these, for example, the library is remotely accessed, and students can access the resources. And the other thing is the support. We wanted to make sure that students are provided with the support they needed, be it on the technical or academic side of things, or be it at the personal level. And for that, we created what's so-called the service desk, what we call the service desk, and that dealt with the sort of the academic technical side. And also we built in using MS Teams, we built or we initiated some rooms where students can come meet advisors, meet counselors, and so forth. And this was all done by integrating some of the technological solutions into our teaching and learning. Now, in addition to that, we made sure that we provided 24/7 what we called Ask UOS hotline and chat. And this is something that students can ask us any questions. And some of the questions were answered automatically, and some of the questions were sort of channeled to the appropriate. In addition to that, we dedicated several number of activities, virtual activities, that basically they were non-academic activities. For example, orientation. We had a very good event, orientation for students. We also had an event where we had the UAE National Day celebration, was also virtual. We also held a number of activities using different social communication platforms, Zoom or MS Teams or so forth. And yeah. And
Dr. Hussain, basically, you were able to digitize the full ecosystem of the university.
Absolutely. I think this was one of the things. And in fact, to be honest with you, at the University of Sharjah, we really looked at COVID as an opportunity. An opportunity that enabled us to, utilize all of this, this ecosystem that you talked about, and then we made sure that our students or at least we provide all the services needed for our students. We know it's not the same as if when they were on campus, but at least we tried our best to make sure that they have these available for them, and we continue to learn from this experience. And in fact, this is one of the things that in this webinar today is to learn from the experience of other institutions.
Thank you, Dr. Hussain. Thank you, Dr. Hussain, for amazing points. Now we will move to Ian. So Ian, we've known each other for a couple of years. So Ian, for many universities, moving to digital learning means digitizing the existing education system, basically developing online learning platforms or deploying online learning platform, digitizing the content, representing the current assessment as it is in a virtual environment. So basically taking the same education practices that we have in face-to-face setting and expecting it to work in an online world. But we are hearing now from many educational scholars that instead we need to reinvent the education for digital learning system. So do you agree with this? If so, how we could do that?
Yes, thank you, Faisal. It's a real honor to be part of this discussion today. And in response to your question, absolutely, I do agree with that. I think, actually early on during the pandemic, a term was coined within the educational technology kind of community, which was emergency remote teaching, ERT, which was to distinguish what was happening globally in universities and schools and so on from actual digital delivery of teaching and learning. So emergency remote teaching is a temporary shift in instructional delivery to respond to a crisis. And if we're honest, that's what certainly in the early days, all of us were doing, because unless you're already delivering fully online, you haven't got time to adapt in a real way. And the kind of shift that was necessary, one of the ways to look at it is it's a complete shift in medium. And when you shift in medium, you have to shift the content as well, the way that the content is created. Something that you create for radio will not work well on TV, and vice versa. Something created for TV will not work well on radio. And there's a great story I heard once about, it was when IBM introduced email system in the 80s to, internally. While they were planning that, they did an in-depth study looking at the number of paper memos that were going from office to office, communicating different things. And they used that as a proxy in order to do their capacity planning, to know how many servers they'd need and what capacity it would need to be, because they quite understandably thought, well, an email is an electronic form of a paper memo. And superficially, you can see that makes total sense. So they looked at that number over a number of months. They assumed it would be that number plus a little bit of room for growth, and that's what they planned. Actually, within the first week, they went multiple times over capacity, because as the medium changed, so did people's behavior, so did people's approach to it, the way they used it, what they would send, what they would write, the numbers they would send, and so on. And I think we can think, if we take an example like a lecture, again, superficially, you could say that somebody sitting in a lecture theatre listening to a lecturer speak is no different to that same person sitting in their bedroom listening to a recording. But we know that actually there's a huge difference in terms of how that person engages with the content, the connection that they feel with that lecturer, how much they absorb what's being done, how much they're actually paying attention. So something like a lecture has to be completely rethought in terms of how it is actually delivered, and because the medium has changed. So that's one aspect there, the medium change. The other area I look at, and Dr. Hussain covered some of this really well, but it's the shift in time and space nature of the instruction. And I think it's very easy to forget is some of the things that we take for granted that just exist in a face-to-face context. Like, what you don't need, it sounds absurd, but you don't need to tell a student how to open the door of a classroom and find a seat. You don't need to tell them which direction to face. If you get them to do group work, you don't need to explain anything. They can just gather up in groups. When you translate those kind of things to online, you can't assume they know how to do all of those things. So the way that people are inducted, students are inducted into it, is absolutely essential, because they're not just learning the subject now, they're actually learning a completely new way of learning. And so, you know, you can just end up in a position of cognitive overload where thinking about the content, because actually they're too stressed out about being able to get on there. So I think a lot of the things Dr. Hussain was talking about is absolutely key. As well as adapting the instruction, we need to adapt how we actually, or as you put it, Faisal, the kind of university ecosystem. How do they find their way in? How are they told about that? How do they find support? They can't just wander down the corridor to an office. So what's the equivalent of that? And you know, in the business world, in kind of you know, online systems, you have like the customer journey, you know, where the user interface designer will walk through what the customer does at different steps and experience it as a customer does. And I think that's exactly what we should be doing as educators and as in educational management, looking at what is the student journey, how are they experiencing it, what bits are working, what bits are difficult, and try and make it as simple and as coherent a process as possible. So I hope that helps address the question. Thank you.
That was really, you know, perfect, in evaluation, and also, you know, in a perfect way to say, you know, to answer my question, and that's, you know, always expected from you, Ian. Now, you know, talking about the dealing with, you know, university and complex system in university, we will move to now Mohammed Abdelal. Mohammed, it's very interesting that, you know, if somebody look at the work at King Abdullah University of Science and Technology, especially the smart city, that, you know, there's something you have established there. It's a living laboratory. So you apply your work actually in a living complex system. So this is, you know, and this system allows you to study the effect of innovative emerging technologies and new trends such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data in a living complex system. So how these studies and experiments will enable KAUST to play a leading role in advancing the education in KSA in Saudi Arabia. I know that, you know, KAUST played a great role in health sector during the pandemic. So now just let us know, like, I would like to know, you know, how your work will play that in a broad role.
Sure, certainly. And good morning, and thank you for having me as well. I mean, I think if we step back a second, the fact that we are all connected here on a panel virtually is a testament to the level of maturity that we've reached. I think if you go back a few years ago, you know, having such a forum most likely was not going to be easy and possible with a click of a button. So you can see how we've all come to a level of expecting this to work and seamlessly. If I talk about KAUST a little bit, King Abdullah University of Science and Technology, it is a higher education institution with master's and PhD only. We don't have an So a lot of our faculty and students are focused on research and lab work and actually being physically in a place to do experimentations. But also, KAUST is uniquely positioned in a way that we are also a city. We are a full-fledged city. We run a campus. We run a city. Our president, keeps saying that he's a president of a university, but he's also a mayor of a large city. So we have citizens to take care of as well. We have facilities, retailers, roads, transportation, a lot of things. So what happened is we began having this kind of innovation program about 2 years ago that allows us to experiment rapidly with technology that is advancing. We're looking a little bit in the future, looking into what's coming next, and trying to create this environment that allows experimentation inside KAUST, knowing that things may not work. Some technology may not work, but the uniqueness is we took a step back and we said, we don't want to focus on technology, we want to focus on experience. So we mapped out our portfolio around experiences of students, experience of visitors, because again, people do come visit the city, personal or business visitors, around how do we conduct meetings, how do we do mobility and transportation in the city. And that experimentation took place pre-COVID. And we began testing things out and actually breaking it and knowing that what will work and will not work. Then COVID hit, right? And when COVID hit, you ended up with a little bit more of a change in the journey maps of these experiences, because they were physical. Now they moved into virtual. We discovered that one ingredient for success is having that prerequisite infrastructure in place. Connectivity is a core prerequisite. If you don't have solid network, wired and wireless connectivity, things would have been a very challenging environment. Now, luckily, we had that infrastructure already in place, and the Wi-Fi connectivity, VPN for people that are not even around the city or out of the kingdom, were able to connect, and all that came into play very well. But I think the challenge we're all gonna be seeing it in the near future is that if you probably see it today, that we were physical, we went to virtual, and now we're about to enter this hybrid mode right now. And a lot of, I'm sure you're seeing it as well, our classes, our events, our conferences are becoming a little bit of a hybrid, and that's a challenge, right? Because the technology somehow doesn't cater well for that hybrid environment. If you've seen it, if you have people in a conference physically sitting there and virtually, and people open up their mics, you got that feedback, the audio, and that's a challenge. And I think we're all going to be looking into this hybrid world, maybe not long, I hope not long, but at least in the near future, is how do we combine this hybrid world of people that might be teaching remotely, and somebody's in the classroom or in the lab or in the conference. And that's the challenge I think we're going to be working with in the next few months at least.
I mean, that's really, a great point about, having, prerequisite infrastructure ready. So, so it's you're preparing you for any unexpected situation. So, so it looks like your work and research paid out, after all. So we now, we will move to Dr. Rana Tamim, and a very dear question to me, because I'm also in the same field as Dr. Rana from education technology field. So Dr. Rana, if we talk about your work as a thought leader in education technology in UAE, and you've been talking about and also doing a lot of research in this area, and I think before maybe 2020, you might be considered as a futurist. People think about your work as a theoretical work. So so my question is like, how do you think people see the importance of your work or field of work now compared to before the pandemic? And how crucial was your work and research and studies in EdTech field especially to guide your decision as Dean of College of Education to provide like alternative learning experiences for students at Zayed University during the pandemic? To you, Dr.
Thanks a lot, Faisal, and thanks a lot for all my colleagues who have really set the stage for what I'm going to also help set the stage for what I'm going to say also. Because as I was listening to them, there were points that really crossed with what the research has already said. Originally, as you noted, educational technology was at the forefront, but everybody thought of it as something that is beside the point, a future perspective. And if we want to be honest, it has always been the fear of resisting teachers, faculty members who are worried about the technology taking the space and the place of the faculty member. And if the COVID, I look at the pandemic as a catalyst for the whole process of transitioning to educational technology, or more active involvement in educational technology. I wish it wasn't. I wish we didn't have to go through a pandemic, but the reality of the thing at the present time, it was a global professional development for teachers from K to 12, along with higher education, to get involved in technology. It was not an option anymore. So previously, the research that we've worked on and the systematic reviews and meta-analyses we've conducted have clearly indicated that moving or using technology as a replacement is not what is needed. It's the downfall of technology. If I take, and as Ian was saying, the lecture in the physical space has so many other components that are not considered within the electronic space. So we have completed, like one of the reviews we've done was based on 1,055 primary studies with more than 109,000 students for across the years. And the indication was clear. Technology has to give a benefit or to be helpful for students, it has to be used with an integrated and interactive approach rather than a one-way lecture. So that is key. Another thing that is important was the notion that involving technology and students in cognitive support, in an approach where cognitive support is helpful, like simulations, concept maps, anything that can help them organize the information in their mind will be way more helpful, along with interactivity with, like there are three interactivity we all know. There's the interactivity with interaction between student and professor, student and student, and student and content. It's not enough to use it for student and teacher. It has to go with student. So that's where the breakout rooms came to be very helpful. It's important to have the student content interaction, and that's where project or problem-based learning was very important. So in the move, we're always thinking about the transition that the students passed through, but there's also the transition that the faculty members went through. And what we did to help, like at the College of Education, what I did to help my faculty was make use of the previous research and also look at it from a humane perspective. It's an overload. So what happened was the first phase, I tried to recommend as much as possible for them not to go directly synchronous. Asynchronous is easier. So for the faculty member, going for one step, getting acquainted with the technology and the students getting acquainted. As Ian said, the notion of opening the door. A lot of, there's the misconception that the next generation, they know technology, they can work with it. We don't have to train them. But research does tell us that they know it for their own personal use, not for teaching and learning. So they're at an advantage with the technical aspect. But when it comes to teaching and learning, we have to train them, also the students. So the first, let's get used to that component, but soon after, within 2 weeks, once everybody was comfortable, let's move with the synchronous component. So these were the pieces that we kept in mind, and we had to also work on the assessments. We had an overall shift in reviewing the assessments to make them fitting more for the online component of the thing. It was not merely exams. We had to shift to project-based and other aspects. And there's a lot to talk about, but I hope that with this, I gave an overview of a response to your answer, to your question.
You know, you summarized, you know, I think it's very well when you said that, you know, when you mentioned in a way that technology should add value. It should not be just, the focus should not be on the technology. It should be how technology will add value. So, Dr. Rana, being a professor in education technology, how you see the future of education technology field? How you know, or what? Or do you think once people get vaccinated, things will go back to the normal?
Well,
from your perspective, do you think that we will have more like EdTech degree programs, and with the universities that who have existing program, would they change the existing program? Because now we're talking about EdTech experts not only working at schools, as lab technician or ICT teachers. We're talking about them
Mhm.
as the leader of change and the making them as a digital transformation experts or officers, and do more a role in education.
A very important question. I think that is on everybody's mind. The thing that, in my perspective, based on observations, based on research, and also incorporating the whole holistic perspective of education, which also started with Hussein when he said it's not just the content and the curriculum, because the curriculum realistically includes the whole experience. So yes, I know that there are many people who are looking at things with the notion that we're going to be, the face of education will be totally different. I don't believe it will be 100% different. If COVID has proved anything, it has proved that first and foremost, it is the teacher that makes, or the instructor or the professor who makes this technology meet the needs of the students. It's not a technology per se. We've always been saying this as EdTech people. However, the resistance and the challenge of getting people on board, accepting that technology is a tool that can help you, I think this is where the pandemic has really helped us as EdTech people. So it has shed light and put it center stage. This is important, this is helpful, this can be beneficial, but this is not the only solution. So in a way, that's where I see it going. Yes, it will be more central. Our voices will be heard more. Our expertise and the research that we conduct will be at a higher level. But I feel the need to comfort teachers with the notion that EdTech or technology is not here to take the place of faculty members. The Zoom space is not going to take, or whatever, Zoom, Teams, whatever it is, it's not going to take the place of the physical university, because previously the university that had technology had the added value of a marketing angle. I believe at the present time, the university that has the face-to-face and physical component will have that marketing bigger push with the students. So I think it is going to help us go for the more the perfect world, which marries both the best of all worlds. So the hybrid and the blended is where it goes. And I think, and I hope that, yes, our research will be taken into consideration way more.
Yeah. So we'll be hoping for the better future, inshallah.
Yes.
So now I'll move to Mr. Muhammad. So Mr. Muhammad, KAUST being, I think, we've been looking into news media. We've seen how KAUST, were was the key, one of the key organizations combating COVID-19 with the medical research and medical labs, and how KAUST helped the Saudi government. So were there any similar initiatives by KAUST in the education sector? So did KAUST play the role supporting other institutions in Saudi Arabia with research or with any guidelines or with expertise?
Certainly, there's many, and again, it's always tricky because you can think of KAUST as the academic institution and KAUST as the city as well. So we're serving both purposes. When it comes to education and other institutions, we've conducted several, let's say, workshops, discussions, and peer reviews with others, sharing a little bit of that knowledge of again how we've, again, nobody's perfect and we're not perfect, but how we've managed to circumvent some of the impact of COVID on teaching and learning. And again, how the prerequisite of an infrastructure is important. And again, there's a little bit of a digital bias because some institutions may not have that level of connectivity. So clearly there's a bit of a gap where an investment needs to be done. And this is a perfect time, by the way, for CIOs to go to their finance and CFOs and say, We need to build up the infrastructure because you've seen what happened. That Wi-Fi project that was on hold, it's time to do it, right? So from that education perspective, yeah, we've been sharing knowledge and best practices as much, and we've been learning as well from other peers in Kingdom. When it comes to the city and what's happening in the kind of the smart city living space, very much a lot of discussions have been taking place, a lot of experiments have been taking place. We've been testing things around autonomous mobility and autonomous driving and experimenting with these driverless cars and shuttles. And we've been sharing that knowledge with others. And we also have, interestingly, we also have, I forgot to mention that we have a K-12 school system in KAUST. So the audience here, if anybody is in that level of K-12 teaching, we face the same challenge as well that we're having with college and university faculty and researchers. How to get K-12 students in a COVID world to become connected and again serve the classes and continue the curriculum. One interesting thing we did at KAUST is that K-12 system that we have is an opportunity. So we actually tapped into that young group of students, especially around high schoolers and even younger ones, and made them part of the experimentation. And we brought them into the work we're doing, and using their, call it Gen Z perspective, and even Gen Alpha perspective, what's coming next and how they look into their day in the life of a student. They will be the workforce of the future, and they will be almost dictating how technology and experiences are designed in a education, but also in a city living space. How they wake up and how they interact, and we all know it's different, right? We all know it's very much, mobile ready, quick on the finger. Very little, let's say, enterprise systems that they use. They use, phones and devices. So we brought that K-12 into our education system, learn from them as well. So a lot of things that will probably could take us longer to talk about, but I'm conscious of time.
Yeah, I mean, personally, for me, I will be looking forward to look into how you will experiment with AI and machine learning in education. So I'll be looking forward to see any data, any research in that area. Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Mohammed. And so let's move to Ian and the question for Ian. So Ian, we know each other, and I know that you have experience working with different colleges and universities in Oman. So, and you've been involved for a long time about, in terms of digital transformation, especially, encouraging universities to adopt the more interactive learning via technology. So, from your experience, do you think that COVID-19 has been the catalyst of that accelerated the digital transformation in higher education? If yes, then in which way?
Yes, thank you. It's a really good question. The obvious answer to give to that is yes, it is and will be a catalyst to digital transformation. I think the slightly more honest answer is that perhaps it's a little too soon to truly tell, and that we need to wait until the dust has settled a bit to see what it actually looks like, because I think the way ahead is still full of challenges, and it's incumbent on all of us as educational leaders to navigate that well, so that we can be in a place that actually offers better value to the stakeholders at the end of it. So I think there's a few areas where we need to keep our eyes wide open, and in some ways a lot of this has been covered, so I won't spend long talking about it. But I mean, one thing is to not invest enough. So as Mohammed was just saying, this is a perfect time for CIOs to go and say, we need this now, and he's absolutely right. And I think that needs to be, the importance of having the right infrastructure in place at every level, the systems and the integration between the systems and the experience that delivers to the academics and the students. And Dr. Rana is right to point out that we often look at the student experience but ignore the academic experience, but actually the experience they have reflects on the student experience because they're the ones supporting them. So it's absolutely essential to make sure if we're going to benefit from this in the future, and it's not just going to spring back to, as you were saying, Faisal, everybody's vaccinated back to normal. We don't want that to be the case. So there has to be investment in place in systems and also in people. There needs to be more focus on instructional design. What kind of instructional design expertise do we have in our institutions, and what kind of instructional design support are we giving to the academics? What kind of learning technology support are we given? Is the learning technology just one of the many IT systems that gets handled by IT, or do we have specialists in place to make sure that it's working well? So investment is key. I think the other thing, which is kind of related, is we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Like, there is a lot to change, but actually there's a research and practice to draw on. And there's also some pioneering institutions that have done this kind of thing for many years. So we need to look at that. We need to look at the literature. We need to have conversations like this, network, share knowledge, share best practice, because if everybody's just trying to reinvent the wheel, nobody's going to really get very far. So collaboration is key, sharing knowledge and expertise and working together in a collegiate way is absolutely essential. And I think that will make a real difference.
Yeah. And I think, from what I understand and also what you're saying, and also, from my experience as well, I think a lot of things changed, but as you may know, the budgeting priorities still need to change. So more investment in areas that especially in private higher education sector, the decision makers are still hesitant. I think they might be looking forward for back to normal, but we know that they will not be the old normal. Back to Dr. Hussein, who was very smart to answer all the questions that we were thinking about. So in one by answering one question, he answered a lot of other questions. So Dr. Hussein, let's wrap up with you. How you see the role of technology after COVID-19, like after people get vaccinated, and then there will be like a glimpse of hope that things are getting back to normal instead of lifestyle. How you see the role of technology in your university, like in Sharjah University, after COVID-19?
Oh, sorry. Am I on now? Okay. I just wanted to take a few seconds to just remind everyone, and in fact myself as well, just a few months before COVID, we were in a conference in Dubai, and the discussion was about technology adoption. And if you remember the curves that we had, technology was advancing so exponentially, and yet the adoption was lagging way behind it. And I think now, if we revise that curve, I think that curve will definitely be different, if not, a little bit reversed. So going back to your question, the way I personally see, I was involved from day one in this transformation, so to speak, in our institution. And the way I see it forward is that, yes, I agree with colleagues that we are not going to, technology is not going to take over, but I see it as a complementary. It will complement what we have in our education system. One thing that COVID did is accelerated that. So the way we used to do things before, especially in terms of training, one thing that we learned here at the University of Sharjah is that because of the response or the emergency response nature of the situation, we were put in a situation where everybody had to learn in a very short time. everybody had to be trained in a very short time. So one thing that we sort of benefited from the whole experience is that it accelerated everything. Now, is it going to take over? No, definitely not. I 100% agree with my colleagues that it's not going to take over, but the utilization will be much higher and to our expectation, because before, as let's say, especially from an administrator point of view, we invested so much in the learning management system, in the SIS system, and all of these reporting tools and so forth, and yet the utilization was low. What COVID did, it's accelerated that, and obviously we definitely will be using that for the benefit of the technology now, and hopefully everybody's vaccinated and coming back, but yet we will continue. In fact, just 1 minute is that few seconds is that in the University of Sharjah right now, we're thinking very much, we're thinking about the hybrid model for post-COVID. And I think every institution is looking at that. So again, I see it as a complement, as a support, a technology, but we will still have our education the same way as we had it before.
Thank you, Dr. Hussain. Now, I personally thank all of you for this, interesting and very, fruitful discussion panel. I'll give 1 minute to Danny. Of course, we got few points, but they were not, questions. So I decided not to ask this question because they were just points from the audience, not questions. To you, Danny.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing such interesting and valuable insight into technology integration at your well-respected universities and higher education in general. In this era that we're living in, the impact of using technology, as you all agreed on the learning process in higher education is greater than ever. And it was really amazing to hear from you as thought leaders about your experiences and best practices. So thank you all once again for your time.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the invite.
Thank you, everybody. It's been a pleasure.
Take care.